All right, so this is the second half of our session tonight, of our Texas Mentor Talk session. Andrew Hartnett is going to lead a discussion about how they're setting up Google Classroom to be able to do more individualized remote trainings for their team. Go ahead and take it away, Andrew.
All right, let me share screen. All right, so I've got just a little bit of information or background context stuff that I'm going to go through, and then we'll just kind of do a demo of what it is that I'm doing. So my objectives were to try to find a way to provide a way for students to stay engaged with Pearadox and or FIRST. And it was something that I wanted to be able to continue to use whenever we can go back to in-person stuff. So I didn't want it to be so focused on the virtual stuff that it loses benefit afterwards. And I've also been talking to some students, and I've learned that some students really kind of crave a school-like environment where they're told what tasks to do and have everything outlined. I've been focusing a lot the last like 4 or 5 years on pushing the like FRC is not school type thing. You know, it's not a classroom thing. We don't have homework. There aren't test scores or whatever. Like, it's whatever you want to make of it. But I think that gives almost too much freedom to people that have spent the last 14 to 18 years of their life having so much structure and no freedom that it was hard for them. But I also wanted to make sure to make it so that it's not so rigid that students that don't thrive in school wouldn't thrive here either. And I wanted to make sure that students or mentors could use it to help kind of like assess where their skill levels are. I'm sure we've all had various students that can be either side of it, of they don't realize how good it is that they're doing at things and lack confidence, or the other way where maybe they think they know a lot of stuff and they maybe have too much confidence and there's a lot of gaps that they don't or that they have that they don't even realize. For larger teams like ours, it might also help for mentors that don't get to interact with the 50 or 60 kids on their team to know what other students might have some skill sets if you need a different task, and if we had some way to know who's more skilled in what areas or who's done some of the things. I also wanted to have some acknowledgements here. So 3005 inspired me with their Google Classroom for the Onshape training. And then 3538 definitely inspired me with a lot of their breakdown for skills and curriculum. They've got a couple of different web pages set up with how they've done things, and I've taken a lot of the content or setup or structure goals kind of from that. A long time ago, I talked with Bruce Jackman and Jim Fox when I was with the Gatorzillas about having things for like Xbox achievements type things, so that students maybe want to get those achievements or whatever, kind of have that stuff. And then recently, I've learned a little bit about this POGLE, I think is maybe outside, process-oriented guide and inquiry learning. It's a teaching pedagogy. So that's a lot of focus on like small groups and having students kind of learn from each other too. So where possible, the last couple of weeks, I've been trying to figure out how I might incorporate some of those things, but I haven't learned enough about it to really figure out how to take most advantage of that. So I'm sure everybody's aware of the issues. Virtual is hard to engage people. Large virtual groups can be intimidating. I don't know how many people have large team meetings versus small ones, but we've got a team that, like, when we have our general team meeting on Saturdays for an hour, we'll have like 30 to 40 people show up every Saturday. And if it's just me talking to 30 to 40 people, I have no idea if they're paying attention, or if we try to open it up and ask questions and get a lot of people to talk in one large group, well, like, that's just overwhelming. So in Zoom, we've been doing breakout rooms of like 5 to 7 people. These are the different roles that like POGLE defined here, is a manager, recorder, reflector, and presenter. I've got their descriptions here. They're mostly self-explanatory, and we don't always have all of them. I try to make sure that we've always got like the presenter and recorder defined for each of the different groups. I encourage that to happen. And then the other thing is that we still did our like new team member meeting in like May, once the school year ended, whenever they finished all their tests or whatever. And so we've got new students on the team. We've got students, we're a big enough team that we have some students that, they know each other, but they don't really know each other. And so when you get into these virtual environments, then you're just kind of randomly paired up with people in breakout rooms. I've definitely seen where shy people, don't speak up, but then other people they're afraid, like, oh, well, this person knows what they're talking about in this group, I don't want to sound stupid or something. And so they don't speak up or whatever. between having a bunch of new students and people that work in different subsystems that may not feel as comfortable speaking up and talking about things, we've also been trying to establish small rotating social hours. So we did like a fun facts thing that was a lot of fun for our kids, and you could use like Zoom reactions for trying to do 2 truths and a lie. But that's going to be a focus that we do for the next couple of weeks, is try to get our new students and veteran students to know each other better, to encourage more engagement in the breakout rooms. So it's not always the same, 1 or 2 people talking in each breakout room. But the thing where I've been putting a lot of my focus on is developing a Google Classroom setup. And so the way that I've got it set up is I've got one parent classroom that links to all the other subsequent classrooms. And so in the parent classroom, I'll have topics of like design or electrical, manufacturing, maybe I'll add in like media or chairman's or whatever other culture and operations types things. And then break down each of those topics into novice, advanced, beginner, proficient, and competent. So just to kind of visualize that, that's kind of what this ends up looking like. So my goal is to have, a novice for each of these different things, an advanced beginner classroom for all these different things. So this ends up being a lot of Google Classrooms, and which is why I've got the parent one. The parent one's pretty much everything that's in gray would go in the parent one, the quizzes, the topics with links to these other ones. And that way, like a student could come in and know like, okay, well, I want to learn more about electrical, and they just focus on this tree or whatever. And so just to give some descriptions, I'm sure several of you have seen the things from the like first mentor guidebook or whatever it is that they call that, for like the I do, you watch, I do, you help, you do, I help, you do, I watch. And that's kind of some guiding principles for some of this, just to kind of give some idea or some description for it. But then these are what I'm trying to use to guide what kind of content goes in each one of these things. And I'm still trying to figure some of it out, and some of these things may change. But for where I'm starting right now, I'm focusing on trying to get as many of the novice ones done. And all of my novice material focuses on trying to introduce components and terminology used, so that they can be a part of the conversation. Or if we're in the shop and I say, hey, we need a mechanism wheel or something like that, that they might respond still with, I don't know where that's at, but at least they'll know what they're looking for. And because I feel like every year there's a lot of times where you're talking to somebody and you say something and they don't know the component or they don't know the terminology. I'm not thinking about the fact that they may not be familiar with it, and I don't follow up with a question of like, do you know what that is? And if they're afraid to ask or whatever, some of that stuff can just be hard when you're a new student and you're surrounded by a bunch of people that it seems like everybody knows what they're talking about. So I've got a heavy focus on the novice stuff just to make it so that people are more comfortable being a part of the conversation. So that's kind of the guiding class principles. I've got a public copy of the classroom. I'm going to show it from the one that I'm using for the team, but I've got this in case anybody wants to go and make a copy of the classroom for your own purposes. So if we go to classroom.google.com, you'd see up here, you'd be able to join a class in the upper right. So you join class. I'm going to paste in that class code. Give it a minute. All right. So now I'm in the public training structure for it. And so you can see that I've got a getting started one that like has some training slides for the students to try to understand a little bit about like what's going on with this and how do they use it, how do they figure out what it is that they want to do, whatever. And then they would be able to go in and add things. So for instance, I've got a design, the novice course classroom code is this. So you'd have to copy this guy in, you'd go back into classes, you join class and post that in. And so now this is adding the design novice class. And so in here, I've got topics for common FRC components and uses, the quizzes for those things, and then things for getting set up with Onshape, since that's what we're using, and some Onshape training videos. And so I try to have a focus on all of these things of like, if you're new to FRC, if it's your first year on a team, what are the names of components? I added in these questions, which was definitely some inspiration stolen straight from 3005 as far as like, when they do the presentation, do they feel like they actually learned it? Is it still confusing? Or is it kind of somewhere in between? And I've tried to emphasize to the students that, like, hey, if this is not helpful to you, if you read it and you feel like you don't understand it, that's a reflection on me and my presentation. It's not a reflection on you and your ability to understand it. And so I'm trying to really emphasize to them, I want their honest feedback on, is this understandable or not? And so with each one of these things, I tried to include some objectives of what it is that they're doing, and then talking about what's the topic and how do you use it. And then I go into some actual terms and some specific components. And I'm trying to keep each of the slides roughly 15 to 20 slides long total. Because my goal is that, you know, you could do one of these things in about 20 to 30 minutes. And then these quizzes, I think, are like 5 minutes, but it's sometimes hard to tell how long some of these quizzes may actually take. I thought about having these be in OneDrive, because the OneDrive quizzes will tell you how long it is that it took for somebody to complete it. But I'm just going to rely on my veterans and people to tell me how long they take. So you could go through and answer these things. I'm sure everybody's done forms, so you're going to be familiar with it. But if you haven't done it for quizzes, you can submit it, and then you can view your own score right away. So it'll tell you, you know, what you got right and what you got wrong. For some of these things, I've got feedback of if I think it might be confusing for some people, or like what I think they may have been confused about. I've got feedback on things. I am definitely not a teacher by trade, even though I do enjoy some of these things. And quizzes, man, they're hard to make. It's hard to make sure that the content's not trying to trick the student, that you've got quizzes, but you still have a quiz that isn't just like copying and pasting from the material to check if they really do understand it or not, and balance all of those things. And the nice thing is that even after you take it the first time, you can come back and you can take it again. So a student could take this as many times as they want. I've got a thing in here about expectations to emphasize to them, hey, if it's going to help you learn it to take the quiz and have a presentation up at the same time, you aren't cheating. That's fine. Like, I just want you to learn the material. And yeah, so that's really a lot of it. And if anybody's interested, we can go through some more. But I've got the public one set up so people can see it. And if they want, or if anybody wants me to, I can add you as a teacher so you can copy the classrooms. Let me switch screen to the other one real quick. So the thing that I am, is this, are you guys seeing no, let me stop share and reshare the other one. So the thing that I am testing out right now that I hope goes okay is that I've got a student that's been working on a lot of the presentations for the manufacturer for hand tools or 3D printing and terminology. Some of my goals with this are that one of the things that I might have be in the competent or advanced beginner thing is that I would expect my students to go through and say in the design novice, they would go and give the intro to wheels presentation to a bunch of the rookies, or maybe like 5 rookies or whatever like that. With Google Slides, you can add your own narration to it. So at some point I could go through and add a voiceover of me talking about all these things, even though I hate hearing my own voice. But I think it'd be cool if I could have it set up with the expectation that veteran students would give the presentation, and they would be able to answer any questions. And it would, I think, have the benefit that the veteran students aren't having to create the content. They could just focus on presenting it, which might make it a little less intimidating for them, or just more engaging for them if they're focusing on the content part of it. The other thing is, if anybody's lucky enough to have like the G Suite education license or enterprise or whatever that is, you can set up the quizzes so that you can import the grades. And so somewhere in this page here, you would just go and have it import all the quiz grades and assign them here, which would be, I think, great. They don't have that for the free one. So if I really wanted to go and let's see, do I have one of the quizzes available? I can't find, here's a quiz. So I can go and look at the quiz, and I think, no, it's not here. I'm trying to remember. There's a way that I could view responses to it. Maybe I have to actually, let me try viewing it in the folder real quick. So if I go to the gear quiz, here we go. You can look at the responses. And Google Forms gives you some insight as to like how people are normally doing on it, things that people frequently miss. So apparently I've got one of these as that's a really confusing question, and only 2 out of the 14 people got it. So that tells me I probably want to go back and look at my wheels presentation, figure out what I need to add to it, or if I need to reword this question, because clearly I'm not doing a good thing here. Some of them are probably just like, I've got multiple correct answers, and I think sometimes students like read the right one, or read one right one, and then don't read the rest of them, or whatever, things like that. Yeah, I think the other thing I was going to mention is the other way that I might recommend if I want, or if anybody wanted to yank any of this, is just I can share the classroom folder with you, and you can feel free to modify anything as you see fit. I do like the structure that the Google Classroom has, but if you copy the classroom, you still have to go into each assignment and still assign it. Like if you copy the classroom, it leaves everything as a draft rather than assigning it, which is really annoying, but it's workable. And let's see, so let me go back to my other one. This is the one that I want. So that's the majority of it, really. There are definitely some room for improvement in things. I shared it with Alan and a couple other people and got some feedback, and we had some conversation of like, is this appropriate to teach for novice or not? Is a worm gear, something that I want students to even know about when they first start out, or is that something that they can learn about later? And I think Alan convinced me to finally take the worm gear out when he was like, well, if a student comes to you with a worm gear designed in something, you're probably going to go ask them to go back and reevaluate and design it out.
Yeah, so part of what I was talking about in that whole discussion is not even just that, it's just like, how are the scope of what should we teach students first is, I think, a more like philosophical question that is different to me than where you're at right now.
Yeah. So at any rate, there's things that I'm sure are out of scope. There's things that are missing. I was looking at something else, and I saw like an indication of like, oh, when you put a nylon lock on, you want to make sure that you have the plastic part up. And I've thought back to the several times that I've seen a student install that backwards. And I'm like, you know what, that's a good thing to include in the novice level training. And so just as many like simple little things that like you come across throughout the years. Creating the classes and quizzes is definitely time consuming, or at least it is for me. Maybe an experienced teacher can do it faster than me. I also made a comprehension quiz so if we go to here, I've got the comprehension quiz. So if somebody thinks, okay, you know what, I've already know all the design novice stuff, I just want to check it. This is literally just a combination of the 6 tests. And so it's a lot of questions, and it would probably take, I think it would probably take me 15, 20 minutes to just go through and do all this. And is that too much? And the answer is probably yes. But maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. So I don't know. We'll see how all that goes.
I kind of like the comprehension quiz. That seems somewhat useful, honestly.
Yeah, I just don't know how big is too big.
And you can be like, if you know it all, pass this test. Like that's.
Yeah, I think the thing that I've learned too is that I've got a student that's he's been amazing. It's his second year on the team, and he's making a lot of the presentation slides for me. And I asked him to make one for some wrenches just to cover all the different types. And I asked him to include socket wrenches. And I found out after the 3rd time I asked him to include socket wrenches, he didn't know what a socket wrench was. And that's fine. Like I don't think he had to use it or never called it by name. And I don't know, there's definitely a philosophical question too of like, does it matter if you know what the name of it is or not? I'm sure plenty of students that could design something or build something and not realize the names of what it is that they're using. or other options that are available to them. And is that okay? I think the answer is yes. But I think in this virtual world, this is, I don't know. I'm also a big believer in like having a strong foundation anyway, so I don't think there's any harm in that. But it's tough to make sure that it's not something that people use as a way to limit themselves of, oh, well, I haven't gone and read the material for this thing yet, so I don't know it yet. So I think that's something that I'll be cautious of as I go through. But yeah, so this is really all I've got to present. I'm happy to go into some specifics of the actual classroom if anybody wants to see anything.
So Andrew, have you thought about using this for sort of teaching the rules as a process for teaching rules? And
Oh, that's
a good
an
question.
Interesting idea.
I know 1678 has their rules quiz, but I do want to, like, strategy is one of the topics that I want to have a novice, advanced beginner, proficient, competent thing in. And like, I don't know, because there's the novice level of like just understanding what the rules are and what the point values are. But there's also definitely more advanced things of like trying to figure out how to, I don't know, break the game or how your alliances match together, or like, why is it that this team of 3 really awesome robots lost a match? And it was, because of strategy or maybe poor scouting or whatever. I think that there's things to do there, but I don't know how to write that down yet.
So actually leading off part of that discussion I had earlier with Andrew when we were talking about what is novice, I went back in and have some slides now because I realized we don't have anything for Spectrum on where I think is like true novice, which is like the first slide is what is FIRST and FRC. Like that's the whole first slide deck. Because it's not a given that the kids know what they're even doing. And then it goes into like, what does a season look like? What does an FRC match look like? So there's different slide decks for some really novice things that were like, okay, I'm talking to a parent or like the 6th grade sibling of one of my kids, and they want to know more about it. What do I tell them? Back to that level of novice where they've never even been on the team before.
Do you think everything in the robot rules is covered by the other topics that you have? Or do you think there would be a like how to get a robot through inspection as like a topic?
So that's definitely going to be one of mine for sure that I plan to work on.
Yeah, I think that's something like, I don't know, I feel like the end result is that, I guess I didn't talk about this. I do have some things in here in the classwork that are links to videos to go watch. And in the advanced beginner one, I've got links to like videos that Nick Arrested or whatever his name is, the Cat and Cookies person on Chief Delphi, some of the videos he did in Onshape. I'd want to include some from the Ramp video series from a while ago that Adam Hurd did. I imagine that there's plenty of the things that Spectrum has in their recommended reading list that I'll link to in the classwork as well. And so I think ultimately, yeah, Josh, I would want a topic or a course somewhere in there of like getting a robot through inspection. Like my dream is that everything that my dream is, this is just a library of whatever thing it is that you need to go learn more about. A student could go find it somewhere in here and hopefully have it set up easy enough to navigate through to go find. So yeah, there might be a whole topic for just like at competition, and there's a section for getting through inspection. There's a topic for how alliances work. There's a topic for I don't know what we expect from students while we're at hotels or traveling. So it could be, and maybe that's also something that goes in the top level training structure. So right now I've got a class or a topic for understanding this training structure. I imagine that I add a topic here that's like safety material and a safety quiz that everybody has to take. I imagine that there's a topic here where I talk to some level about like harassment and understanding like, hey, you might be joking around with somebody and that joke bothers them, like this is a silly, for instance, but we have a student that was trying to be supportive of a student that ate the strawberry leaves just because they're high school kids and weird. And so now the kid that was supporting the strawberry leaf eater is called a leaf eater. And like, it's just a funny joke to them. But if I were that kid, at some point, I'd probably get really annoyed with it and say, okay, that's enough. Please stop with that. I'm not even the leaf eater. And so try to understand like, hey, if somebody says that this isn't a joke to them anymore, whatever. So some kind of harassment training like that.
Yeah,
could go and hear things.
in my like big breakdown that I've been running, I've also had stuff with like including some of FIRST or other resources on diversity and inclusion stuff that they're starting to do and things like that too. Just like everything that we expect our kids to know over some amount of time can start getting it added into this stuff.
Yeah, and like, I don't know, I'm hoping that some of these things I can just go and link or make a copy of somebody else's presentation and leave it as is. So similarly, if anybody goes and wants to do something like this and you want to use any of the slides, feel free. If you want to modify them, if you want to brand them your way, whatever, that's fine. But I'm hoping I can definitely not create all of it from scratch, but try to have it be a good home base, similar to the recommended reading thing that Spectrum has of just a bunch of links out, just organized slightly differently and in with our own stuff.
Yeah, because I think if the more teams who are doing this same system, since it is free to everybody and it's easy enough to copy, and a lot of teams are using Drive anyway as their main go-to, because we had tried something last year to kind of get some of the CAD stuff and some of the other stuff started in Coursera, but because it wasn't in Drive, it was like this whole separate thing, so it never got updated, and like it was harder to look at, where this is so much easier.
Well, I think that's it for me. So I'll stop share, but I'm happy to take any questions, or if anybody wants to get more in depth on it, anything, happy to do that. Oh, okay. So I do have one other thing I can try to share. Let me find where that's at. Just to talk or try to share a little bit more about what my intent or process is trying to be. I imagine that this is something that takes several years to build up. Like if I get most of the novice level stuff done like before January, then I'm ecstatic. So this was like a starting point for where I was trying to think of like what things do I think is in each level. And I'm sure like I've already moved some things around when I was looking at this before like this weekend. Because the other thing that I forgot to mention is that my goal is that at the novice level, all of this is stuff that can be auto-graded with quizzes. At the advanced beginner level, you know, maybe there's quizzes, maybe there's some challenges where they have to go off and do something. But I think at the competent and proficient level, all of that has to be like kind of an open-ended challenge of some kind. They either have to physically build something or they have to design something in Onshape. They have to create something, you know, maybe it's a culture and operation thing. So maybe they have to create something in Photoshop or InDesign or something like that. And so the competent and proficient is where it gets more mentor intensive, because I feel like you have to have a mentor actually like look at something and provide feedback as to what's good or bad about it. But I anticipate that, you know, a lot of students get in the novice and advanced beginner. I think my goal is that it would be great if everybody gets into the competent level. I think the proficient, because to me, the proficient is that like you don't need a mentor. You can identify the problem and the solution yourself. As opposed to the competent, like you might have the problem given to you and then you can work independently and you don't get hung up on intermediate steps. So my goal, of course, is to get everybody here.
So have you thought about how it breaks down over like how long the student's been in your team? Because that's how I was thinking about it in my head, was more like novice was brand new people and like the first few weeks that they're on the team. And then ideally after that, they try to start learning beginner stuff for the stuff that I was doing. That's how I at least thought about it. And then competent wouldn't be till probably their possibly second year or third year on the team. Probably
Yeah.
second year on the team.
So I think that's similar to me. I think first year, I don't know if I would rather them, you know, get through the novice level in multiple different areas or focus on doing novice and advanced beginner in just like one or two areas. I do think that most students should be able to at least get into some of the advanced beginner stuff in one area. And I feel like if they don't get through novice and into and through maybe most of the advanced beginner of something, then I feel like I'm letting them down or they're just not being engaged. But yeah, so I think second through fourth year students are somewhere between the advanced beginner and competent, and hopefully by their third year, they've should hopefully be competent, or like in the competent. I feel weird sometimes saying competent. I don't know if I want to stick with that level or not, because I feel like if you're less than competent, it implies that you're incompetent. But yeah, this is definitely my goal.
I haven't come up with a better word yet either.
Yeah.
I removed advanced and just put beginner for our stuff because that started getting weird. But
yeah, I feel like I think the reason that when other people and I were talking about the advanced beginner or beginner thing, the reason for adding advanced beginner is beginner and novice seem too interchangeable. It's not real clear that one is like a step beyond the other. But yeah, I don't know. I think I remember there was a long conversation in the chat about what should these terms be called.
Yeah, that probably makes sense. Yeah, I think my plan is to have numbering systems, so it would make.
Yeah, and I think that's largely what 3538 does. So they've got, let me see if I can, nope, that's not the right one. It was curriculum. So they've got like mechanic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and fabricator 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And maybe that's the way to go. Because like depending, I don't know, like I'm going to put the lathe, mill, CNC router kind of all in the same category of machinists, whatever that is.
Yeah, that seems odd to me too. Like I don't, like it doesn't seem like all the ones are at the same level to me at some point.
Right. And so, you know, at that point, like this isn't necessarily a description of skill level. It's just like a topic, and having it be a number then maybe makes sense. But yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff obviously here too to gain some steal some inspiration from.
Yeah, because like in my mind, whatever's at novice or level 1 is like if a student walks into the team, they can start learning that, and I wouldn't expect them to start learning the lathe.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so actually, if you want to see a slightly different, because I've been talking to Andrew about this for a little while, so the slightly different interpretation of this is what is the very beginning start of what we've been working on. So we kind of laid out some of them, they're nowhere near complete, but laid out some of our novice, so like basically introduction to FRC and like what do we do on the team. If a parent wants to look at this, it's what does their kid do on the team, that type of thing. So a breakdown of what actually is FRC, all of that stuff that gets go over. These don't need to be long at all. These often get talked about at like our orientations and our parent orientation and stuff, but it's having this material somewhere that everyone knows how to access it. If a new kid does show up in the middle, they don't miss it, because that's one of the things we do a lot. We're like, yeah, we talk about it the first couple days, but then we have people join in January and they don't get the same talk, or they might get a really abbreviated version and can't find a way to go back and get the same information. So getting some of that into here and actually documented was one of the first steps. And then the bigger technical one I did that is about to get a video done for it, because it's just about finished, is I went about it a different way from how Andrew did it, where he was doing kind of specific on a topic and kind of covering a whole domain. I started from, here's the kit bot, here's the kit chassis, the kit drivetrain. Let's go through it and talk about why or how it works. Because then you have a building block to understand, okay, this is why we can use these different wheels in the future and all of that sort of thing, because I know what wheels do and I know how a motor attaches, and kind of getting some of these details, because we had kids work on every bot this year who were new, and we were like, here are the instructions, go through and ask questions, and then there were all sorts of realizing that they were doing it but not really understanding what they were doing. So just kind of going through and figuring out how to get that understanding done well, and trying to use a simple language, now remove any physics out of it, because this is the very beginner one, as we possibly can, to where they just know what's actually happening. So all of that will be public at some point. If anyone wants it early, let me know and I can add you to the folder. But and then actually there's one more. And then this is the giant list of things I plan to cover in the future, which is very massive. So at some point, because that was my original course for the summer, and then I decided to move it into this thing now that Andrew's system made more sense in some version of it.
It's just a 19-page outline. That's impressive.
Yeah, basically, it's largely a 19-page outline of everything you would need to know inside of FRC robots. Pretty close.
Yeah, I'll be asking for a copy of that at some point.
And by no means, this is literally so many notes of just like me sitting on my couch going like, oh, I forgot about this thing, and like figuring out where it should kind of fit inside of it. It is not organized at all at the moment. And just like other kids from the team adding stuff when they realized there were things missing and things too. But yeah, it is massive. There's a whole like intro to programming for non-programmers. So like, what can the actual robot? What can we tell the programmers to do? And like, what can't they do? Because too often designers are like, oh, they'll just fix it in programming. I'm like, that's not how it works. You need to know at least something about what the programmers can actually accomplish.
Yeah, I would love to work with coworkers that also understand that. I think I said it, but I can add anyone as a teacher to anything so that you can make a copy of it. So if you want to be a teacher in something to be able to copy the classroom, shoot me a message with your email, and I can either add you as a teacher to the live one if you want to copy that and get out real quick, or a public one if you want to be able to mess around with it a lot more.
Okay. We're going to, any other questions before we stop this recording? All right, so I think that's the end for